Hey everybody, what we're going to do today is make a really easy southern comfort food dish, and that's oxtails and rice. And I'm going to show you two ways of how to do it. One way is in the oven and the other way in the crock pot. So if you don't have a lot of time on your hands and you want to just pop it in the crock pot and walk away, I got the method for you. Or if you're at home and you're doing some stuff and you want to pop some in the oven, I got the timing down pat. So check it out. Alright, so we're going to start out with our oxtails. Our oxtails have already been rinsed and patted dry. And what I'm showing you now is basically how they look, and those are the small ends. So I went to the butcher and got some from behind the counter, and I also bought a package. When you buy the packages, they'll stuff those little end pieces in there. So go to your butcher and pick them out for yourself and get the nice larger pieces. Now what I'm doing is I'm just cutting off the excess fat off of the edges of the oxtails, and that's just going to help you control some of the fat that's going to end up being rendered down and cooked into the dish. And here's another tip: when you have to trim or cut meat, do it while it's cold, right out of the fridge. You'll have less resistance and it's much easier. Now I'm just going to cut up our bell peppers. I have one red bell pepper, one green bell pepper, and 2 small onions or 1 large onion, and we're just going to cut that into some nice slices. Then I'm going to move on to the garlic that I'm just slicing up, leaving it whole, having those nice big slices. And you can't forget to season your meat. Make sure you season your meat with some salt, some pepper. I'm using Grand Diamond all-purpose seasoning. And this time I also wanted to go in with some smoked paprika. Make sure you season not only the sides, but the edges of the oxtails too. Next, we're going to go in with some flour, and we're going to lightly coat each of the oxtails with some flour. Now, flour is just going to help us brown the oxtails when we put them into a hot skillet. Also, it's going to add a nice layer of flavoring and body to the gravy in the dish. Now, I have a Dutch oven over medium-high heat on top of the stove with about 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm just going to brown the oxtails on each side for about 2 minutes. When you do this, make sure you do it in batches, because if you put too many in there at one time, they're just going to steam and they won't brown. So do it in batches if you have to. Now, after they've browned on each side, now I'm going to turn them on their sides, or the edges if you want to call them that, and we're going to brown them there too. And that's what they look like after they're nice and browned. Then I'm just going to quickly deglaze the pan with a little bit of beef broth, and that just means to get up those crispy bits on the bottom with some liquid, deglazing. So on the left side, you see what I'm doing now in the Dutch oven, and the crock pot is to your right. So all we're going to do is just fit those oxtails down into each of the vessels, whichever one you choose to use, and this time they can fit in tight. So now I'm just going to take the remaining part of the beef stock or beef broth, you can use either one, and pour it right till it gets up to the top of the oxtails. Sometimes it'll take the whole quart or a little less. It's okay. Very forgiving recipe. Then we're going to follow that up by adding our fresh thyme and our fresh rosemary, which are great additions to this dish because it's going to cook a long time and those flavors are just going to meld throughout. Then we're going to add the sliced garlic that we sliced up earlier, along with the peppers and onions. And if you notice, I didn't slice up the peppers and onions really small. I kept them a nice size because this dish is going to cook a long time. So you still want to be able to recognize the peppers and onions once the dish is done. So now we're just going to cover up the Dutch oven. Even if you have to, use a piece of foil because you don't want any of that liquid to evaporate. Now I'm just going to quickly show you how to do the crock pot method. Everything is the exact same. The herbs, the garlic, and the broth go into the crock pot. Then your peppers and onions go on top, and then you just put the lid. And that liquid, again, is going to meet up at the top of those vegetables. That's why you don't have to necessarily cover them. It's going to be so good. So here are the cooking methods. If you're going to use the oven, we're going to go at 350 degrees for 4 to 4.5 hours. Your crock pot, you're going to go on high for 5.5 to 6, or low for 8 to 9 hours. And there's your finished dish. This is really a nice, warm winter comfort food dish. It's really easy to make, and it's so tender. The beef just falls off the bone. That connective tissue has loosened up and much more tender. Just make yourself a nice pot of rice. Go ahead and add one on top. Add those peppers and onions, and then ladle in some of that light gravy over the top. You've got yourself a meal. Be sure and make a vegetable to go with this. Just don't eat rice and meat, okay? So whether you decide to use the crock pot method or the oven method, both of them are going to yield you some delicious, tender results. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you guys coming and cooking with me. And remember, these recipes and others can be found at gdseasoning.com. And I'll see you next time.